sixth grade champions. Good to see you today. We are continuing with our book, Granted. And I guess fortunately, Ophelia met a dog that she has now named Sam. And we are on page 25. We're not on page 25. We're on chapter 25, page 154. Chapter 25, page 154. And we're learning about how Ophelia is going to find the coin. Not all fairies have wings. The fairies of the North American contingent are winged, of course. But there were many of Ophelia's kind who were born without all the flap and flutter. This doesn't mean that those fairies didn't fly. They just talk other creatures into doing the hard work for them. Ophelia had seen pictures of her distant relatives on the backs of brown bats and brush finches, fairies who harnessed turtle doves and took them for a dive. There was even a race of fairies known to ride on the backs of hawks, though Ophelia guessed them to be incredibly brave or incomparably stupid, for a hawk would sooner eat a fairy than let it hitch a ride. Legends even tell of giant fairies that run on horseback, but you can't believe everything you hear. Fairies on dogback, however, that was unusual. Ophelia was fairly certain she was the first fairy to try it, and just as certain that it was the smelliest mode of transport she could have picked. The advantage to having thick, tufted fur was that it made it easier for Ophelia to bury herself in it. Pressing flat against Sam's back as he trotted dutifully in whatever direction she whispered, it also gave her plenty to hold on to, though the dog would occasionally yip at her if she pulled too tight. The disadvantage was that her new ride stank of damp garbage, and Ophelia had to lift her head every few seconds just to catch a fresh breath. Not to mention, she had to suppress the urge to work out all the tangles in Sam's fur and pick out the birds that had nested there for heaven knows how long. Never in her life had she seen an animal in as sore a need of a bath and a brush. Even Charlie would surely shake his head. At least the dog didn't have fleas, none that Ophelia could see. More important, he could trot much faster than she could walk in her current state. Ophelia pressed herself close to Sam's warm skin and closed her eyes, listening carefully, past the foosh and foom of passing cars, past the steady drum of Sam's heartbeat, through the hissing, beeping, honking symphony of city life, picking up the thread of Kasara's wish. She thought she could start to make it out, though it wasn't so much a heard sound as a hunch, and it wavered, sputtering in and out like a candle flame, flickering in the wind. I think it's more left of here, Ophelia whispered, and Sam changed course. Thankfully, the sidewalks weren't as busy as the streets. Humans preferred to roll around in their big metal boxes rather than use the 2 good feet nature gave them. The few people they passed couldn't help but look at Sam as he went by, though. She wondered what they thought they saw. A bird hitching a ride on the back of a dog? Or did the camo make her appear to be a giant tuft of fur instead? At least in the camouflage, if the camouflage were to fail, her brown uniform would blend with Sam's dirty fur better than the pink suit. She tried to stay as low as possible, and whenever Sam saw a person, he changed direction slightly, putting some distance between them. Ophelia got the impression that he wanted to avoid human contact just as much as she did. It became easier the farther they went, away from the mall where Ophelia had lost her wish, and the inner where she'd met the business end of a broom. The streets getting narrower, the buildings more spread out, grass soon replaced concrete, trees replaced lampposts, and Ophelia started to relax just a little. When the streets were completely empty, she sat up and took a huge lungful of air. As she did, she caught a hint of something in the wind. Not the wish She'd already told Sam that wishes carried no scent. No, this was something else entirely, something almost as good. Did you smell that? She asked. Sam stopped abruptly and lifted his snout to the sky. Oh, yes, he said. That is a very good smell. What is it? That, said Ophelia, snorting up another glorious whiff, is donuts. She was almost certain of it. Oh, Sam said, clearly impressed. Ophelia wondered if he'd ever had a donut before, or how long it had been since he'd eaten anything that wasn't already decomposing. She hadn't eaten since the morning, and just the sugary, sweet smell made her lightheaded. She couldn't continue to track this wish on an empty stomach, she decided. Follow your nose, Sam, Ophelia said. It's time to fill up. Fairies are born from rose petals and fern fronds. They are nurtured on nectar and dewdrops. They take what they need from Mother Nature in return for being her caretakers as well, making homes of her trees and feast of her seeds, living on nectarines and wild onions and dates dipped in honey borrowed from bees. But even fairies have their cravings, things they discover outside the natural world, sumptuous treats and exotic delicacies brought back by the scouts, whose mission it was to stay abreast of human activity and keep the archives full. Things like caramels and ice cream and spiced frappuccinos. Charlie was especially fond of those. Almost all fairies had a bit of a sweet tooth, but Ophelia had a mouthful of them. Her true weakness was donuts. From the moment she first tasted one, the sugar glaze dissolving on her tongue, sending tremors racing up and down her whole body, she knew she was in love. There were so many things humans had invented that gave her pause. Their explosive weapons and their smog-belching factories, their boxy gizmos always bleeping and buzzing, their giant towers stretching clear to the clouds, and airplanes newly added to the list. But donuts. Ophelia wondered why no human had ever wished for a never-ending supply of them. A selfish wish, but one she could get behind. The source of the smell was only a block away, and Sam easily sniffed it out. A sign said over a little pink and brown building with peeling paint, Sweet Sally's Bakery. The parking lot was practically empty. Sam shook his head. I have never had a donut before, he said, confirming her suspicion. Is it better than dead stuff? On my wings, it's 1,000,000 times better than dead stuff, Ophelia told him. The question is, how do we get some? She supposed they could just gallop in and rob the place, like the outlaws she'd seen in pictures down in the archives from a time when humans wore giant silly hats and scarves around their faces. She pictured herself on Sam's back, a can of knockout spray in hand, hooting and hollering as they ransacked the bakery, leaving a trail of unconscious bodies in their wake. Except that would be breaking at least 30 rules of fairy human engagement. Wanting a donut probably didn't count as justifiable cause for going on a fairy dust brain rampage. We need a plan, she said. Ophelia and Sam sat and watched a man emerge from the bakery holding a bag. She could smell them from where they sat on the side of the road at least 50 yards away. We could take his donut, Sam suggested. Ophelia shook her head. That's not a good plan. But you said donuts were better than dead stuff, Sam reminded her. They are. They're wonderful. But you can't just take whatever you want when you want it. You have to pay for it one way or another. There are rules. Everything comes at a price. Even donuts? Even donuts, she replied. Sam whimpered and dropped to his belly, resting his muzzle on his paws. He was watching the door, waiting. Then he licked his chops and sat up suddenly, nearly knocking Ophelia off. Trash, he barked. Trash? What about Ophelia started to say before nearly falling over backward and gripping a clump of fur as Sam took off, bounding across the street toward the bakery. Sam, where are you going? She shouted, but the dog ignored her, galumphing through the parking lot and skirting clear around the back of the building. His snout held high, taking big sniffs, the smell of sweet fried dough growing even more intense. And then she saw it. The brown plastic bin, Mike's Waste Management Services, printed in white along its side. The lid was open and there was a platoon of bees circling above it, occasionally plunging down into its belly before buzzing back up. Clearly, there was something in there worth diving for. Trash, Sam repeated. Ophelia nodded in appreciation. Glorious, glorious trash. We'll read a couple more pages. Chapter 26, page 161. Books can teach you only so much. Ophelia had been subjected to endless talks of training, reading manual after manual and poring over pictures. But sometimes you can learn about a thing only by experiencing it firsthand. And sometimes you had to get those hands dirty. No one had ever bothered to teach Ophelia that there was treasure to be had in trash cans, outside of broken turkey bones, of course. She wasn't trained to be a scavenger. They certainly hadn't told her that it was possible to find donuts in the garbage. Such a ludicrous thought. Who would throw away donuts? And yet, here they were, a whole box of them sitting near the top of the plastic bin, beckoning with sugary promises that made her mouth water. Granted, it hadn't been easy getting up there. Ophelia wasn't at all ready to risk flying and further injuring her wing. So instead, she carefully perched on Sam's nose and he leapt up, putting his front paws as high as possible. Excuse me, Ophelia said to the circle of bees who were dutifully fulfilling their own mission. Operation Feed the Queen. Do you mind sharing? The bees, perhaps noting some distant kinship with another winged creature, simply nodded. Not much for conversation, bees. Great dancers, though. Ophelia stared greedily at the box that had come open when it was dumped. Its contents appeared untouched, though she was certain the bees put their hairy mitts all over them. Half of the donuts glistened with glaze and the other half were coated in white frosting, like a crust of hard-packed snow on a mountain's peak. Ophelia carefully lowered herself over the lip of the bin onto the box and took a deep breath. Garbage never smells so good. Regular or frosted, she called out to Sam. I don't know. Which one is better, he barked, the tip of his nose just peeking out over the edge. You really can't go wrong. In the end, she tossed over one of each for him, getting sugar flakes all over the front of her uniform, which was annoying, but would be worth it. Then she took another white frosted for herself, heaving it up over the side before climbing back onto Sam's snout and hanging on tight as he lowered her down. Both of the frosted donuts had hit the asphalt, frosting side down, and all three were covered in grit, but that didn't stop Sam, and it wouldn't stop her either. Oh, he said, wolfing down his first in 3 bites. Oh, yes, you were right. This is so much better than dead stuff. We're going to stop right there, page 163. Thank you so much, 6th graders. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow, and take care.